Three, two, one.
Hello everyone and welcome to the video. I'm Professor Amanda and class has officially begun. So if you guys are following, the Silph All-Star Arena Invitationals is going on right now, and we had the opportunity to shoutcast the preliminary rounds with the Squirtle Squad and the Dancing Pineapples. And I don't know if you watched it, but if you didn't, you really missed out on some very close epic battles, and it all came down to the wire. It was a 3-3. The ring to the field specialist, Nopfon, who was like one of the best players of Spain, versus Burnobus, who was one of the best players in the US. And we were fortunate enough to have Burnobus here with us today, who's going to walk us through how and why he did what he did in the finale. So, Burnobus, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
All right, so pressure is on. You guys are the very last ones. You're playing against Nopfon, who is like one of the highest ranked players, not only in Spain, but in the world. Like, what is your thought process going into this matchup?
Yeah, I knew Nopfon was a strong competitor. I think he's currently ranked 9th in the world on Silph, which is, I think I'm currently 15, so I knew it'd be super close. Like, we're both top battlers. We both know what we're doing. So I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and had a lot of respect for him going into the match. My first thing, obviously, I look at the teams and see what I feel like is good. And my initial thought was I really liked how Mantine looked, and that's why I led it in game one. But in my prep, I kind of pegged his the stun fist to have mud shot and not thunder shock, and so he leads that first game, stun fist. I'm like, okay, this is an okay lead, and then I see it as thunder shock, and it kind of just completely flips that matchup and to being slightly positive and to pretty decently negative then, because those thunder shocks add up since there's double super effective. So right then and there, I was like, oh, this first game is gonna be a little tough. And he played it perfectly. He waited for he threw a discharge. I shielded. I wanted to get a bubble beam off to reduce the damage, obviously. And then I waited for the bubble beam and then immediately swapped into Vigoroth. So I'm down a shield. He safe swapped into Vigoroth, which is pretty strong against me because I don't have something like Drifblim that really just walls it. So yeah, that was not an ideal situation. I kind of just went into my own Vigoroth, and I couldn't invest a second shield. Going down 2 shields to 0 was not a winning matchup. So took that first game pretty decisively, and but I got information, which I always think is important when you're doing a best of 3, is to get as much info as you can even when you lose, so you could use that info to make decisions in the latter games. Which I did. Once I knew it had his stun fist had thunder shock, I knew Mantine was still a good choice, but if he was going to be bringing that stun fist and Vigoroth, and Ferrothorn was the third that it seemed like he really liked bringing. Like, Mantine just gets it's a tough matchup all around, so kind of had to reassess from there.
So what's your thought going into game 2? Like, are you a player who gets, if you lose the first one, you get nervous, and so or are you someone who, like, okay, I lost, now I buckle down?
I've gotten a lot better at it. After I used to get really nervous and really kind of get in my own head after I would lose game 1, because you have to win 2 in a row. Like, there's no other option if you want to win the match. Now I don't really just stay calm, take a deep breath, trust my abilities that I could roll off 2 in a row. It's not out of the realm of possibility, and kind of just, instead of panicking, just focus on what went wrong or didn't work in that first game, and what adjustments can I do to maybe get an advantage in the following games. I kind of, in something as kind of how high profile and as an important match of this, I assume that my opponent would probably roll a similar team, just because if it's working, continue, and I would do the same, to be honest. Kind of show me you can beat this before I change it up. So that's when I decided that I was going to sub Mantine out for Wigglytuff.
Yeah.
And
it's a good call for the most part because Wigglytuff is just so domineering with its charm.
It is, and it's still even because my opponent had Ferrothorn, had their own Charizard, I believe. So there were some, checks and counters to it, but like you said, the charm damage just adds up, even on like something like Charizard. Like you could, eventually, force a shield.
Did some stats, and it was like an attack-weighted Wigglytuff can even beat the Ferrothorn in a 2-shield scenario or something, which shouldn't happen as a steel typing, but
for sure, yeah. That's what, because I obviously looked at some of the matchups beforehand, and I knew from a previous meta, or maybe it was GBL somewhere, because I like running Ferrothorn and GBL. But yeah, the charms add up still. You're right, it's resisted, but charm's just such a good move. So I knew that even if I did get a bad matchup, that I had some switch options, and that Wigglytuff still could hold its own against its counters a little bit if I needed it to, which eventually, foreshadowing a bit, I kind of would need that. But so yeah, game 2 then, I believe I led Wigglytuff, into a Vigoroth lead, and that's when he swapped into a Ferrothorn, and I had Charizard in the back. So I'm like, this is great. Just have to respect the Thunder, because Thunder does almost one-shot to Charizard. So as positive as that matchup is, you still have to be really careful, because if you can't eat a Thunder. And so I think it was King. One of the shoutcasters, mentioned that you're only gonna get one charge move off with Pharaoh, because those fire spins are double super effective and just add up. So it's the logical play is to just go for Thunder, go for broke. Like if they don't shield, like you're gonna do big damage and likely get switchback. So I anticipated that Thunder would come and take the shield, be willing to go down, one shield there to keep switch advantage, and knew that I at least had a pretty positive matchup with Wigglytuff and Vigoroth in the back, if it ever got back to that. And I had a bunch of energy on my Charizard then, because I farmed all the way down. So brought the Stunfisk in, and threw a couple Blast Burns into it, shielded the first one, ate the second one. But it did, in kind of a theme, even going into the next game, is my opponent Nopfon was really good with energy management and knowing when he could overfarm, and he did overfarm in that situation to try to get an advantage back. So he overfarms, throws a discharge, I let it go through, and that's I brought Vigoroth in, because instead of having to deal with the mirror later in the game, and I like that Wigglytuff on Vigoroth matchup better than I like the mirror. So brought that into, and to also drain the energy. Like I knew I needed Wigglytuff healthy to take out the Vigoroth, or make it more manageable. So Vigoroth's tanky enough to take a couple discharge or mud bombs, and so he threw a discharge in there. And in that situation, I'm feeling pretty good, because we're even shields now, because they shielded a Blast Burn and ate a Blast Burn. So the Stunfisk is also at like 30-40% health. So kind of in that situation, it's just kind of stay cool, calm, and just play the rest out. If you don't make any errors, it should be a pretty straightforward win. And thankfully it was. Still close. I mean, all the games were really close. So
that's when everyone is at the caliber that they're at, they're really, really fun matches to watch. And it's like one of those things too, as you probably realize when you're in these tournaments, it's like you recognize your mistake, but even if you recognize it, if you do it, or if you don't do something quick enough, it's that split-second decision that can really flip a matchup.
Exactly, and especially when you're playing at like the highest levels, those are the kind of things that you just kind of push you to the next level. Is just being able to quickly assess the situation, what your options are, and picking the best one. And that's where I think staying calm and cool and not panicking really helps out a lot to just try to make sure you're
for other players how to do that. I know it's like you can't really control your mind and your body, but just some maybe tips that you go through yourself to calm yourself, to collect yourself before the next round?
Just kind of, if you've prepared, prepared for the match, I've really thought about your team and the team building process, and you kind of know where your advantages are, your disadvantages are. Just, I guess, kind of trust your abilities. Because there still is inherently chance in this game, right? There's leads, there's, sometimes you just run into a bad matchup or a bad team comp, and that happens. So I think just trusting, in your abilities to win those neutral matchups or favorable matchups, that you keep that advantage. Just be positive that you kind of put in the time to get a good result. And even if you don't, it happens. No one wins every single game. It's
Gotta shake it off.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a big proponent of, we all do this for fun too. Like I try to never, let losses get to me too much, because I do this for fun and for and love being part of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Like winning is fun, yes, but it's not everything.
Yeah.
So
now you guys are 1-1. This is the final of the final. Both teams are at 3 points. The next one, who wins, brings you guys to the next round of the tournament. So what are your thoughts going into this epic round 3?
Well, this is when the nerves really start kicking in, because it's like, okay, well, now it all comes down to this, and especially when you're in one of these kind of team formats, like you want to win for the team, like you like the camaraderie, you don't want to let your teammates down, even though my team is wonderful, and no one gets down or gets on anyone for a loss, but still you want to win, and the pressure's really on. So I really felt like Nopfon needed to kind of respect the Wiggly lead again, but I didn't think that they would lead Charizard, just because I'd led Mantine in game 1 also. So even though I lost that game, I still kind of showed that I was willing to bring it. So I kind of did think that I expected Ferrothorn or Vigoroth in the lead. So I was thinking, I like Vigoroth in there, even though, that one of them's a mirror and even. Just, it kind of hedged really well. And it was a bit risky because my opponent had a Drifblim and very easily could have led it. But I was kind of just was thinking, he hasn't brought it yet. Even though I have been bringing Vigoroth, I have been bringing other things that manage Drifblim fairly well. Like Wigglytuff has a good matchup against it. Charizard can, if it gets a blast burn through, and any sort of energy advantage from Charizard on the Drifblim matchup is going to be good, because even if they get an icy wind off, the blast burn still does a ton of damage. So I felt like it's sometimes risky moves pay off, and I'm like I'm gonna lead Vigoroth. If I run into a Drifblim, I'll just safe swap into Charizard, because Charizard was a relatively safe swap against him, especially if you got a couple fire spins in before the swap. They didn't have a water type, so there wasn't any a super hard counter. So yeah, I kind of just stuck with my game 2 team and just switched it up a little bit, kind of hoping to catch a Ferrothorn in the lead, and I thankfully did. But
that's also a big part of playing is reading your opponent's strategy as well. Like it's a mind game of, well, they might think that I'm going to lead this, so I will lead this, and when it pays off, then it really pays off.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it gets in some of these matchups, the mind games get turned up to 11, and it's like, is my opponent going to think I'm going to do A, so I'm going to do B, or are they going to expect that I will do B and do C? And it just, at some point, you got to cut it off. And I like to, especially in important games like there, it's just kind of hedge. Like Vigoroth had 5 out of 6 decent to neutral matchups. That Drifblim was the only hard counter, so that's a 5 out of 6 chance I'll have a playable lead.
Yeah, you're a mathematician, right? So I mean, this is something that you
yeah, I do love my numbers. but yeah, so got the positive lead Vigoroth, my Vigoroth into their Ferrothorn. But they had a good safe swap in Charizard because I didn't bring Mantine. You know, I had Wigglytuff and
it was basically your plan as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we both had, you know, similar game plans for sure. And so I was thinking about switching to Charizard, but they were ahead on energy, so they have the advantage. So it's kind of like I'm gonna stick it out
because I know that you have a Charizard and they have a Ferrothorn, so it's a great backline.
Yeah, exactly. I knew I had the Charizard, like you said. But I had to try to be conscious, like we talked about earlier, is that a Thunder from that Ferrothorn is gonna hurt still.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to give up both shields, but I kind of got put in a situation where, you know, I had to. Like, I needed to keep that switch advantage because if they get it back, that Ferrothorn's going to line up on Wigglytuff later, and I didn't want that. So Nopfon took a body slam and shielded one, and then from there I was able to counter down. So I had a good amount of energy going into the next matchup that he brought in the Stunfisk. And I think I was pretty much almost at a Bulldoze when it came in. And I was just thinking, there are similar DPEs. I think Bulldoze is slightly better, but I just went for the big move. You know, like do the damage, like if they shield, they shield. And he did shield it. And then kind of over-farmed me, and right before I was going to get to like a body slam, kind of threw off a Mudbound to finish me off. And so now we're even shields. They have their Ferrothorn and probably like a 70%ish or 80%ish Stunfisk. So I have to go Wigglytuff here, right? Because I need that Charizard against Ferrothorn. And I knew that they were going to swap at some point, and he actually swapped at like a really good time, like in the middle of what I think my first charm. So Ferrothorn was able to get off a Bullet Seed before I could swap. So at that point, I know I swapped the Charizard, and I know they're going to beat me to the Thunder before I get to a Blast Bird. So
gotta respect the Thunder.
For sure. And so I thought about this before the match, just during my prep. There could be a situation because most Ferrothorn are going to run Thunder here because there's so many flyers. It just makes sense to do the Power Whip Thunder moveset.
Although someone is running Flash Cannon, so
I love Flash Cannon. I run it in GBL, but here I just think there's so many flyers. It makes sense, or I could see why most Ferrothorn would run Thunder here. But Flash Cannon's still a great move with stab. But I know they have Thunder because they've already thrown it once in previous games. So I know I'm not going to get to a Blast Burn. So I make sure I throw a Dragon Claw because we actually CMP'd when I get to the Dragon Claw since they were ahead on energy, just for that chip damage. Because
every little bit counts here.
Right, especially when I have a Wigglytuff in back. That's, you know, the charms add up, but it's you know, they add up slowly. So I basically wanted to get it low enough where I didn't have to eat a Power Whip. That was the plan. And so get that small Dragon Claw chip damage off, and CMP tie, they get the Thunder off. And I surprisingly survived it, just barely. I'm pretty sure that comes down to IVs there, or maybe bubbles hit. I think I'd have to go back and watch from Nopfon's point of view, but I don't know if they hit all the bubbles or... Yeah, I talked to him afterwards. It didn't sound like he purposely undercharged it, but I was actually surprised I survived that. I didn't survive it with much, but just then, because Bullet Seeds are what double resisted by Charizard, so they do barely any damage, and so I'm still getting these fire spins off.
And you're double super effective, so it's
Yeah, and so I got, I guess, a bit of luck there that my Charizard did hang on, but it was also kind of... It's hard to see these things in the moment, but it could have been an issue if Nopfon stopped attacking and let his Stunfisk farm it down, like get a couple Thunder Shocks, because at that point we're both out of shields. It's like my almost full health Wigglytuff against their 80% Stunfisk. Yeah. So
now that you say that, I think that was probably his only win condition at that point, but I don't think he realized that The Thunder
It's hard.
wasn't going to take out the Charizard.
Right, and I like I was talking to him after the match, and I told him I would have done the same thing. I think like it's so hard to see, especially when you're in the heat of the moment. It's a game 3 of this big match. Like it's hard not to get tunnel vision and focus on what's in front of you, because you know if you start thinking too far ahead, you're just gonna take yourself out of the match completely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's hard to see that in the moment, and I personally don't think I would have either. But yeah, that was the win con. There was leaving Charizard with some health to farm a little bit with Stunfisk.
Because I think what is it? You need 2 Mud Bombs and a
discharge.
Discharge for
that should be enough. Yeah. But also what kind of worked out for me is that Ferrothorn had a sliver of health when I brought my Wigglytuff in, so I got a Charm in to take it off. And so if you go back and watch, like then it just becomes races to the charge move. Like
right.
Nopfon's gonna need to get to 3 charge moves, like you said, 2 Mud Bombs and Discharge to do it. I even think 3 Mud Bombs might.
Yeah, probably, and it's a little more energy efficient.
Yeah. So I think it's enough too.
Especially, yeah, that's true, because your Wiggly had already taken some damage, so it's not like it was a completely full HP.
Yeah, exactly. So then it becomes races to the charge moves. Like I knew like his Stunfisk had already farmed a good amount on Vigoroth earlier, so I knew he had a charge move from the start. And I'm pretty sure they threw a Discharge first, and so they needed the 2 Mud Bombs. So then it's basically a race. Like the end of that game kind of looks like it was less close than it was. It was actually incredibly close, because my opponent was building up the 2 Mud Bombs to go back to back.
Yeah.
So
when you're watching the footage side by side, it's really amazing, because you can see how close each person is, and like you were saying, it's really a race to the charge.
It was. They were 1 mud shot short of having both of them, right? So I got to the Ice Beam right as they needed 1 more to get back to back.
Yep.
And Wigglytuff wins CMP, so I had a little more wiggle room, but it was was just super close.
But it's really smart for people who don't necessarily know. You can sneak in fast moves sometimes when people throw charges. So he was doing it the really smart way of he was charging up the 2 to prevent the fast move sneak from going through. So like he played it really perfectly too, and that yard is just didn't have enough health, and like you said. I mean,
I think Nopfon played that I think as textbook as you could. Like considering where that game started, a Vigoroth lead into his Ferrothorn, like that's a negative lead.
That's
to make that as close as it was, like it is still really impressive. And they were great games, and it was a great match, and have nothing but respect for Nopfon and his abilities, because that was one of the toughest matches I've ever played, and it's like hats off to him for making that last game as close as it was with that negative lead.
Yeah. But you won, and your team won, and now you guys are into the semifinals. And do you know who you play already?
Yes. We are going to be playing like Gemma's team, or like the Chias.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I think that's their name.
Yep.
But yeah, another really. I mean, all these teams are super strong. Like they're all made up of top battlers, and there's no easy matchups here at all. But I'm actually playing Gemma.
You are playing Gemma. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they got some really cool matchups actually in there. Like the Master Leagues is Rocha Babyface on our end playing Swagron.
Yep.
Which they're both Latin American battlers, so it's kind of like Battle of Latin America, which is pretty cool.
For the hearts of the people.
Yeah. Speedy's playing Linden, that's going to be a fan. I'm super excited to see those matches. That'll be 2 of the top battlers in the world.
I was just going to ask, what do you think of the meta of this month, the Floating City? To me, it feels a lot like Sunrise Cup. When I was looking at the teams, I was like, oh, this is essentially Sunrise minus the Jeepus.
Yeah, it is. It really is. With some small differences, but the general consensus is it's extremely similar to Sunrise, which is not the worst. I actually don't mind that, just because we've all played it, back in October was that month. So we all have some familiarity with the matchups, where it's not
Everything's pretty much built up already. If you were
right, because it would be a little, I don't know, chaotic if we had this brand new meta and we had 3 days to prepare. That would have been wild.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of worked out for the best to kind of showcase the top talents that are in this tournament. It's because everyone has some familiarity with it, know how to play these matchups, have kind of been in these situations before. So I think it, especially for the field specialist portion, creates these really close and interesting matches, since most of us, if not all of us, have played a lot of these sort of matchups and team comps before.
Right.
So, but it's a fun meta. It's like, yeah, removing G-Fisk, in my opinion, is nice because that was on every single team, as it should be. It's that good. Yeah.
What do you think of the new format? Since you guys are the people who are getting to try it out for everyone, do you like the GBL incorporation into Silph, or were you one of those like, I'd really prefer to just stick to the old format?
No, I think it's a great idea. First off, I love the idea of like these teams, like these factions. This was when we were all kind of hypothesizing what this was going to be. I remember on the Silph Discord channel, we were talking, and I was hoping it would be a team format. So I love that idea. I think it helps build community. It makes it more fun when you're competing as part of a group. Being a part of something bigger it's a really cool aspect of it. So I definitely enjoy that. I do like that they're incorporating the GBL leagues, because there are some people that kind of specialize and might really enjoy Ultra League or Master League, but they don't really Silph all that much. But it kind of bridges the gap between GBL players and Silph players, like kind of best of both worlds here. So I think anything that gets more people involved in PvP and kind of collaborating with each other is a good thing. And I definitely think Silph had the right idea by including kind of both factions of PvP.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any last thoughts or words or?
Thank you for having me on. It was nice chatting with you. I want to thank Silph for organizing this. It's been a lot of fun so far, and I know a lot of I know everyone, at least on our team, has been really honored and excited to compete in this and kind of try out this new format. I probably should shout out my local Discord of Chicago DTC, all my friends there who have supported me. They're great, and I appreciate all of them. So, but besides that, and a shout out to my teammates. They've been great. It's been great, chatting and getting to know some of these people a bit better. So, all around been a great experience, and thank you for having me on to talk a bit about that last round match and the overall match between Squirtle Squad and those dancing pineapples.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Okay.